Well, by now you know my philosophy. Short gospel reading, long homily. Long gospel reading, long homily. The readings today are really about what's important in life. Solomon had it right. Solomon was about to become king and he was young. As a matter of fact, he was really nervous because his brother almost became king instead of him, but King David at the last minute said, "No, I want him to be my king, to my replacement." And God appeared to him in a dream and he said, "Ask me for whatever you want and I'll give it to you." And Solomon said, "Lord, I'm just young and I'm following in the footsteps, the big footsteps of my father, King David, arguably one of the greatest kings that ever lived. I'm scared. How will I ever rule this people that's so vast that you can't even count them?" He said, "Lord, give me an understanding heart. Give me wisdom." And the Lord smiled and said, "Because you've asked for something unselfish, not for gold or power or for the lives of your enemies, I will give you that wisdom. There'll be no other beside you who ever lived that has had as much wisdom as you, but I'll also give you wealth and power and renown." It's important to know what's really important in life. And to be honest with you, a lot of us are kind of afraid with all the pandemic and all of the things that we have to do, the wearing of the masks and cutting back on the singing and all of that stuff, that we're going to start to take things for granted and lose that awe and reverence for the Eucharist and for the liturgy. There's an old story of, there was a monk named Boniface. They called him Bonnie. And he lived in this town where they had a couple of other churches, and a new young Protestant minister came in and he said, "Hi, I'm Father Boniface. They call me Bonnie. Come on in. We'll give you a tour of the monastery." And he said, here's the refectory where we eat, and here's where we sleep. And as he was showing him around, he walked past the chapel and genuflected. And when he genuflected, the minister said, "What'd you just do?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, you went down on one knee. What was that all about?" And he said, "Oh, I genuflected in front of the tabernacle." "What for?" And he said, "Because we really believe that Jesus Christ himself is present, his body and his blood in that tabernacle, just the same way that his Father, God the Father, was present in the Ark of the Covenant." And he looked at him and he said, "Oh, Bonnie, if I really believed that with all my heart, I would go into that room and lay face down in front of that tabernacle and never get up." So easy to lose track of what's important in the midst of all the trials and tribulations and all the craziness in our lives. And sometimes God even sends us things, may not be gifts, they may not seem like gifts at the time, but sometimes he sends us things that helps us to get back and focus on what's really important, like someone getting sick, maybe a spouse that we are taking for granted coming down with cancer, or a child getting sick and there's nothing we can do about it. That's what the second reading is all about from Romans, where Paul says, God makes all things work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So even the trials and tribulations in our lives can be things that bring us closer to God. When I read these readings and it talked about that pearl of great price that the man found, and he sold everything he had because he had to have this pearl because it was so precious. He sold his house, he sold everything he had because this one thing was so precious to him. Is the Eucharist that precious to us? When I read this, I thought about a Jesuit priest named Pedro Arrupe. He was born in Spain about 1907. He became a Jesuit Jesuit priest in the 1930s. I think 36 he was ordained, and A couple years later, they sent him to Japan to do evangelization, to win souls for the Lord. And he was kind of discouraged because he wasn't getting any kind of response from the people. And his fate would have it was December 7th, 1941, when they bombed Pearl Harbor and the United States was thrust into World War II. It was already December 8th in Japan when this happened, and they came as he was celebrating the Immaculate Conception and arrested him and put him in jail. And he was depressed, thinking about the lack of impact his life had had. And as December 24th came around, he heard commotion outside the jail cell, and he thought, I guess they're going to come and take me and execute me. But as the noise grew louder and louder and they grew closer and closer, he realized it wasn't the guards. It was some Catholics who were coming to sing Christmas carols to him to encourage him. He started to cry because he realized that even when he didn't realize it, he'd made an impact. They'd brought people closer to Christ. Even at the risk of their lives, they came there to let him know that he was not alone and that he was important to them. About a month later, they released him because he had been so gracious to the guards. They thought, he can't be a spy. And so he went on and stayed there another 4 or 5 years until 1945 or 46, when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. He and his brothers were in Hiroshima when the bomb hit, but their monastery was on the side of a hill, and it was shielded from the blast. And so they opened up the monastery and brought in 150 or 200 people to nurse them back to health. In the midst of all of that chaos, they knew what was important. What was important is to treat those people, regardless of what side of the war they were on. They were hurting. He went on to become the superior general of all of the Jesuits in the whole world from 65 to 83 when he had a stroke. He guided the Jesuits to keep focused on what was important all through Vatican II and all of the other things, the changes that came about during those periods of change. Before he died, he wrote something that I thought I would share with you because it speaks to what's really important in life. It's called Fall in Love. Nothing is more practical than finding God, than falling in love in a quite absolute final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you do with your evenings, how you spend your weekends, what you read, whom you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything.